Thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm glad to be in Vancouver. I've been here several times, but never get to see the city. But I know it's beautiful. I'm coming to the end. In fact, this is my final presentation of a cross-Canada tour, which started a long time ago. I started out in Hamilton, then went to Halifax, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Winnipeg, and now Vancouver. And this trip, as most tours, has been filled with many, many events, many discussions, some angry, some friendly, some tearful. A full time discussing Jewish identity, Jewish particularity, Jewish commitment, and especially the Jewish prophetic. The Jewish prophetic is the center of my life and of many Jews around the world. And I have met so many young and not so young Jews whose life is focused on the prophetic, whether they announce that or not. But for me, it's important to discuss the prophetic, where it's been and where it's going, because it is within the prophetic that the future of the Jewish people lies. Without the prophetic, there is no reason to be Jewish. And I believe that the people Israel gave the prophetic to the world. From my perspective, it's the greatest gift to the world. Without the prophetic, there is no meaning in the world. There may be no meaning in the world. The prophet embodies the possibility of meaning in the world. But it is also true that the people Israel are the great strugglers against the prophetic. Both. Now in every community we have the prophetic, and we have those who struggle against the prophetic. But in the Jewish community, it's highlighted. And it's important for me to locate where that prophetic is today and to see where it's going. Today, the Constantinian Jewish establishment is trying to destroy the prophetic. When I say Constantinian, those of you who are familiar with Christianity and its history should know that Christianity started as a small Jewish sect around a courageous and outrageous Jew. And until the 4th century was pretty much of a nothing in the world, until Constantine got this vision in war that Jesus Christ had helped him win, and then established Christianity as the religion of the empire. And it's gone downhill ever since. So we had Constantinian Christianity, and the idea is that religion gets a special place in the empire and blesses empire. Well, today we have a Constantinian Judaism, not because Jews are the majority, no, but because we've linked with empire. We bless empire in America, in Israel, and I've learned this trip in Canada too. May I take a moment? I travel all over the world, and it's so great that Barack Obama is now President of the United States. I don't have to answer the questions about George Bush. In coming to Canada, Canadians have been so polite, but have told me in so many ways that Canada is not America, that you're far advanced of us, and it's just a delight to see that you have a Prime Minister who's outdoing George Bush. So I just, because I've been coming up here for so many years, please let me bask in this. And to hear about the attempt to criminalize speech about Israel, wow, we haven't even thought of that in the United States. So by the next time I come, you may have a different prime minister, so I wanted to just... We can have call and response if it's friendly. So some years ago, oh, I've got to tell you this. Actually, this was my idea, but my student, who actually does the PowerPoint, is from Poland, a young Pole who has come to be my assistant and is my assistant in the Holocaust class last spring and now coming this spring. And she's learning for the first time details about the 3 million Jews that were killed in Poland during the Holocaust. But she's also learning that Jews are not innocent. It's interesting to see her bounce this. And here we have the Western Wall, Orthodox Jews praying, and out of that wall comes the tower that is part of the wall that is surrounding Palestinians. And of course we have the Torah scroll and helicopter gunships coming out of it. Now, by the way, if there are Jews who affirm this as the way of our survival, no problem, because nation states do that. Just admit it. Don't say we're innocent in our empowerment. We were innocent in our suffering, but like any people, we are not innocent in our empowerment. So if you want this, say it. Say it out loud. Celebrate it, but don't try to hide it. But Jews can't do that. This comes back to the prophetic. Jews have always defined themselves as exceptional. I didn't say we've always been. I didn't say we've always been. But Jews have always defined themselves as exceptional. Perhaps we have been, but I'm not saying that. So no Jew in authority is going to admit this. What we want is power and remaining exceptional. This was a book I first wrote. First edition was in 1987, Toward a Jewish Theology of Liberation. I wrote my first article on a Jewish theology of liberation in 1984, after I had been to Israel, Palestine for the second time and had met Palestinians. The first time I was there was in 1973, and I went there on a dare, because after the '67 war, my Hebrew school teacher had gone, as many were taken, to Israel free of charge, and came back talking to me about the beauty of Israel, and I had no reason to doubt him. But I had read an article in Time or Newsweek titled something like The Second Palestinian Exile, or Exodus, about the Palestinians that had been driven out during and after the 1967 war, and just quite innocently, I asked him if he had met any of these people. I think they're called Palestinians. Well, he got very angry at me. He had already wanted me to have my hair cut because he thought I would be a Jewish leader in the future, so he wanted my hair short, and it was quite long. My mother liked it. But he came out and he said, "You don't know anything. You've never been there." And I hadn't. And we didn't think of jet travel quite in the same way we do today. But I thought to myself, I'm going to go there someday, somehow. And in 1973, I was studying in London. And when my friends went to Morocco, by the way, they met up with Mick Jagger and got high with him. So that was the story. I went to Israel by myself. And it was 1973 and October. And I was caught in the middle of the war, the October War. I saw there something, without knowing the history and without any bias against Israel, that people who looked like me, that is European Jews, were on top. and people who looked like they were indigenous to the land were on bottom, Arabs. And of course, we had just gone through the civil rights struggle, and obviously this was in my mind as well. But I didn't know what to say and how to say it, and I was young. But in 1984, when I was invited to Israel, I told them that I would go, but they'd have to keep me for 2 weeks, and I wanted to meet Palestinians. I was invited by a Protestant Catholic dialogue group at Tantur, right outside of Jerusalem. And there I traveled among Palestinians, and I was one of the first Jews who wasn't a military person to travel among Palestinians. And I went throughout the West Bank, sometimes introduced as a Jew, sometimes I couldn't be, and into Gaza. And I sat there in Gaza in homes where parents had lost their children to Israeli military. And they called them martyrs. And of course, I had learned about Jewish martyrs all through history, and including the Holocaust. And there I was sitting in Gaza with martyrs that had been created by my people. And what was I supposed to say to these mothers and fathers? So when I came back, I was determined to speak. But how do you speak after the Holocaust? I didn't know much about Israeli history. Who did? We weren't taught that history. The same thing with my students in the Holocaust at Baylor. The most difficult thing about the Holocaust for them is learning about Christian anti-Semitism. And why should a Jew be the first one to tell them about that? They're not taught about the dark side of their history. And I always wondered how Christians could teach their children Christianity. Did they just say everything was beautiful, or did they also teach them about the other side? But then I was being confronted, and when my first child was born in 1987, there it was, my book came out. I was writing as he was being born. What was I going to say to my children about being a Jew? I want to report that it's fine. I've told them the truth. And they love being Jewish. And after the assault on me and other Jews of conscience, it is a miracle. Now, I never believed in miracles, I must confess. I'm a non-miracle Jew. Although I do believe that the burning bush was not consumed. But I've never seen a burning bush that wasn't. So it's a miracle when I see young Jews, as I have on this trip, embodying the prophetic. At the end of Jewish history, as we have known it and inherited it. That's where we are, at the end. I had to ask the question, what does it mean? Liberation. In our time, I was hanging out with Christian liberation theologians, traveling all over the world, to Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They were asking, what does it mean for the poor to be liberated? They never had to think about what would it mean when they were. It was way too far away. But we had been liberated. We now had power. Was that liberation? Or in the oppression of another people, was that another form of enslavement? Judaism does not equal Israel. My latest book, I didn't choose the title. It's part of a does not equal series, as in Catholic does not equal Vatican. Islam does not equal fundamentalism. Evangelical Christian does not equal Republican. And by the way, it doesn't. I live among evangelical Christians, and it's amazing the variety. There are some Republicans, but there are some Democrats and beyond. It's a very full life when you live in the area that you think about and sometimes condemn. So I got the best title. But I'll tell you, in your bookstores in Canada, I've been in a lot of airports, I haven't seen it once. I keep looking for it. And I'm going to get someone to take a photograph of me if I find it, for sure. But the question, the reason why it's not in the bookstores, published by a major press, is because that title is considered blasphemous. Now, there's no rabbi in the world, no matter how much they support Israel, that would say Judaism equals Israel. They might say Jews have to support Israel. Yes, there are many rabbis who say that. But there isn't one rabbi in the world, now I know somebody will correct me, who would say Judaism equals Israel. It's really not a radical title, but it's considered blasphemy. Now, in the local Jewish newspaper here, there's a title of an editorial today. Judaism does equal Israel. Amazing. But there isn't a rabbi in the world that would say that. So why is it blasphemous? Because they know I'm raising the question of what does it mean to be Jewish in the context of Israel oppressing another people. Now, you might think it's plain justice because most Jews on any other issue would say, you're right, South Africa does not equal white. America does not equal white, right? But on this, it's a line we can't cross.